It all ended on November 9, 1989 during the Peaceful Revolution when an anti-fascistischer Schutzmauer between East and West Berlin fell. This was a particularly important event, marking the end of the Cold War and the beginning of a new, and better era in European history. It also symbolized the victory of democracy and freedom over communism and dictatorship.
The GDR was the furthest west among socialist countries, and East Berlin was its heart. In practice, this meant that the standard of living here was better than in other countries of the Eastern Bloc, but the proximity to the West was an illusion. This is how the island of freedom, surrounded by oppression, developed its architecture. The East world was full of Plattenbauen. Indeed, it was the concrete jungle. We have only one task: to build apartments for the workers, as many, as fast, as cheap as possible. This is how the GDR author Brigitte Reimann captured the post-war reconstruction of Berlin in her novel. There was a sense of competition over who could build a better Germany. The GDR became a hybrid of its former Prussian aesthetics and Soviet modernism, with each construction telling one side of the story of this one-time state. The imposing concrete panel at the center, the scaffolding and industrial structures behind, the gentle mist or a bunch of Trabant cars parked down the cobblestone street. The interplay of these ordinary elements created an enduring aesthetic of East Berlin. If that's the case, why would people try to flee to West Berlin then? Well, under the Allied control of the United States, Great Britain and France, West Berlin was considered a democratic and capitalist island within the Soviet-controlled Eastern Bloc. That's mainly because the governing countries not only made it clear that they would defend West Berlin against any attempts by the Soviets trying to take control of that bloc, but they also heavily invested in its development. For that reason, West Berlin underwent significant changes during that time in a range of areas, including infrastructure, housing, cultural institutions, and cities' government buildings. The Allies spent a vast sum of money on reconstructing and building new roads, bridges, and public transport systems to support the growing population. To be more specific, they built some fragments of the Stadtautobahn in early 1950s to connect West Berlin with the rest of the world. Ernst Reuter and Obermaum bridges are further crucial projects, as their purpose was to connect West Berlin with the rest of Germany and the world. They remain a significant landmark in the city today. When it comes to housing and cultural institution, the Allies wanted to promote the city's cultural heritage by investing in the construction of new residential zones and restoration of museums and theaters. As a matter of fact, Theater des Westens is one of such places that, despite being damaged during the World War II, was reopened with the Allies' funding support. Apart from that, some of the city's government buildings, including the Reichstag and Rathaus, were also restored with the help of the Allies, which were used as a symbol of West Berlin's commitment to democracy and stability that nowadays can be considered as an important chunk of the country's complex history. Fast forward 33 years later, things have changed. As we know, creativity doesn't wait for a perfect moment. People continue modifying concrete panels with colorful graffiti. On every corner you can find street musicians, street art, and exciting installations. Some murals and graffiti are not only completely legal, but also highly encouraged and paid for. Modern-day East Berlin is the hub for it. People know they are in which part of the city just by spotting these elements. Nevertheless, the architecture speaks for itself. If we look at the Berlin Wall, there is the East Side Gallery. The famous Brotherly Kiss by Brezhnev and Honecker speaks history of the city. Let's take a look at Berlin through the lens of students who had been here for the last 2 weeks.
Architecture in one word is
Plattenbau.
Plattenbau and social housing.
Berlin's architecture in one word. Und so in so einer anderen Sprache sagt man Deutsch. Abgefuckt und ranzig.
East Berlin. West Berlin.
Special.
Again?
Expensive.
Our first impression was really positive, as we would describe it as a vibrant and very diverse region. What we mean is that West Berlin seems to be culturally and architecturally rich. That is primarily because we got to know people coming from all over the world who had been living in our neighborhood for a while. The residential zone in which our hotel is located can be characterized by colorful apartment blocks and cozy cafes, and the streets that we wander around bustle with activity with a mix of pedestrians, cyclists, and cars zipping around. What's more, the buildings that we already encounter on a daily basis are mostly architecturally appealing, as they range from elegant pre-war buildings to modernist structures that reflect the city's post-war reconstruction. It is also worth highlighting that the historical places like the Reichstag, the Rathaus, or Brandenburg Gate that we saw in the first week, which we found grand and imposing, are surrounded by the modern buildings. That in turn creates a striking contrast between old and new, traditional and contemporary. It also evokes a sense of timelessness and continuity, as the juxtaposition of historic landmarks serve as a reminder of the city's past, while the modern buildings represent its present and its future. If we bridge the connection between the new Berlin and the old Berlin, the contrast is clear. The new generation is connecting the ex-capitalist West and communist East by rejecting established principles and aesthetics of both axes, but still bringing the historic preservation of both sides. Today's Berlin is a mix of memorials and avant-garde buildings. New buildings are filled with functionalist concerns, racialization, social responsibility, and integration of newer technologies, as well as large transparent surfaces and flat roofs. After visiting the Rathaus, we concluded that today Berlin is in harmony. It's no longer one wall, two worlds. The mental wall is falling down every day thanks to self-expression, environmental sustainability, and unity.